October 13, 1944, an unarmed F-5E. Lightning lands at a Luftwaffe airfield. Near Milan, the pilot is American and he's defecting. This became the first U.S. military officer convicted of treason for collaborating with Nazi Germany and a uniquely documented defection. This isn't speculation, it's documented history. Core facts were public by 1949. Additional files surfaced later. This is the true story of Martin James Monti. To understand this betrayal, you need to know the timing. It's October 1944. D-Day succeeded. Allied forces are advancing from both east and west. Third Reich has maybe 6 months left, and that's when Martin James Monti, a 23-year-old American Army Air Force lieutenant, decided to join the losing side. Monti was born in St. Louis, Missouri, to German and Italian immigrant parents. His family spoke German at home, attended German cultural events, and maintained old country traditions. But thousands of German Americans served loyally in the U.S. military during World War II. What made Monti different? In September 1944, he went a wall from his duty station near Karach, then part of British India. He traveled thousands of miles across active war zones to reach southern Italy, where Allied forces had established numerous air bases. What he did next would shock even hardened German intelligence officers. His target was specific: an F-5 Lightning. This was an unarmed reconnaissance version of the P-38 fighter. This wasn't random. The F-5E had extended range, and being unarmed was less likely to be immediately shot down if intercepted. This was calculated, planned, and in just moments you'll see exactly how he pulled it off. October 13, 1944, at an Allied air base in Pomino, southern Italy, an F-5 Lightning had just completed repairs and needed a test flight before being returned to service. Monti, whose AWOL status was unknown to personnel at this base, volunteered to conduct the test flight. The maintenance chief saw a qualified pilot willing to save them time and authorized the flight. Pre-flight inspection, engine start, taxi to runway. Everything looked routine. Tower gave him normal takeoff clearance. He took off, heading east, the correct direction for a test flight pattern. Then, once out of sight of the airfield, he turned north. Monti flew the stolen F-5E Lightning directly toward German controlled northern Italy. He had to fly at specific altitudes and times to avoid both American anti-aircraft positions and German defenses. His successful penetration suggests careful planning, not impulse. The aircraft landed at a Luftwaffe-controlled airfield near Milan. Monti climbed out and immediately surrendered to stunned German personnel. But the Germans' reaction wasn't what Monti expected. The German soldiers who first encountered Monti were completely bewildered. American pilots didn't land at Luftwaffe airfields voluntarily. Captured German intelligence reports document the immediate suspicion was the aircraft rigged with explosives. Was this pilot a spy? Was it psychological warfare? Monti told his captives he opposed communism more than he opposed Nazi Germany. He wanted to fight against the Soviet Union. He offered to provide intelligence about American aviation technology and tactics, but the Germans weren't about to trust an American pilot just because he showed up at their airfield. Monti was held in isolation while German intelligence investigated his background. They had ways of checking radio intercepts about American personnel, intelligence networks that could verify biographical details and interrogation techniques designed to detect deception. Monti had certain advantages. He spoke fluent German with an authentic regional accent. He demonstrated detailed knowledge of German culture, customs, and current events. He could discuss German military history and doctrine in ways that suggested genuine study. Over weeks of questioning, repeating timelines, planting false leads, and watching him in isolation, the story held. Eventually the Germans reached a conclusion. His defection appeared genuine. His motivation, anti-communism, aligned with Nazi propaganda. His family background checked out. His linguistic Knowledge was authentic and critically. He had demonstrated commitment by stealing an American aircraft and flying it into German-controlled territory. In November 1944, German intelligence made their decision. They would accept his offer to serve the Reich. What happened next would make Monti the first American officer to cross a line no one had ever crossed. Monti's first assignment was propaganda work. German state radio wanted to use him for psychological warfare, an actual American officer speaking with an authentic accent explaining why he joined the German cause. But here's something that probably saved his life. Later, he was terrible at propaganda work. His delivery was wooden. Arguments were unconvincing. And there's no evidence any Allied personnel were influenced by his broadcasts. After several weeks, German officials concluded he was more valuable elsewhere. By late 1944, he was working with SS Standard Kurt Edgars under the alias Martin Wiethaupt, commissioned as an SS Unterführer. Here's what that meant. In 1944, the Waffen-SS wasn't the regular German military. SS membership required ideological commitment to Nazi racial theories and party doctrine. Joining the Waffen-SS wasn't just military service, it was political affiliation with the Nazi regime itself. German personnel records captured after the war document his SS service number, unit assignment, and the oath he took. This wasn't coerced. Trial testimony later established that Monti voluntarily joined and served. Consider the timing. He joined the Waffen-SS in late 1944 or early 1945, precisely when Germany's collapse was accelerating. The Battle of the Bulge had just failed catastrophically. Soviet forces were approaching Berlin. Allied forces were crossing the Rhine. By the time Monti completed whatever training the desperate SS could provide, Germany had only weeks left. Then on May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally, and Martin Monti faced a terrifying realization. He was an American military officer who had just spent 7 months working for Nazi Germany. The penalty for treason during wartime was death. But here's where Monti's plan almost worked. After Germany's surrender, Monti made his way to Italy and surrendered to American forces, but he had a carefully prepared story. His version: he'd stolen the aircraft intending to conduct an unauthorized reconnaissance mission and return it. He became disoriented during flight. Equipment malfunctioned. Bad weather. He was forced to land in enemy territory when he ran low on fuel. Once on the ground, he was immediately captured. The Germans forced him to make propaganda broadcasts under threat of execution. He'd been held as a prisoner of war. Any cooperation was coerced. He'd been waiting for an opportunity to escape when Germany surrendered. It was a fabrication, but in 1945, investigators believed much of it. Why? Intelligence coordination between different branches was poor in the chaotic final months of the war. The investigators who questioned Monti didn't have immediate access to German records documenting his voluntary defection and SS membership. American forces were processing millions of personnel, displaced persons, liberated prisoners, surrendered Germans, returning Allied personnel. The system was overwhelmed. Monti's basic facts were partially true. He had stolen an aircraft. He had ended up in German territory. He had made broadcasts. The question of whether these actions were voluntary or coerced required German records that weren't yet available. On August 6, 1945, Monti was court-martialed, but the charges reflected only what investigators knew: theft of government property and desertion. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for stealing a military aircraft and deserting during wartime. This was actually lenient. The death penalty would have been legally justified, but the American military justice system had completely missed the real crime: the voluntary defection, the willing SS service, the uncoerced propaganda. None of this appeared in the charges. Monti's treason remained undiscovered for now. Under wartime law, death was a possible penalty, and Many expected it, instead what happened 6 months later shocked the entire military justice system. February 11, 1946. Just 6 months after Monti's conviction, President Harry S. Truman suspended his sentence. U.S. Congressman Walter C. Ploser had petitioned the president for clemency. Ploser represented Missouri, Monti's home state, and had been approached by Monti's family. The official justification cited Monti's youth. He was only 24, the stresses of wartime service, and the belief he deserved a second chance. The petition characterized him as a confused young man who had made a terrible mistake but could be rehabilitated. Truman agreed and suspended the 15-year sentence, but there was a condition: Monti had to re-enlist in the Army Air Forces as a private. Here's the irony: if the full scope of Monti's treason had been known in 1946, presidential clemency would have been politically impossible, but because he'd been convicted only of desertion and theft, clemency seemed reasonable, and incredibly the system let him back in. On February 11, 1947, Monti re-enlisted as required and served quietly until an honorable discharge on January 26, 1948 at Mitchell Field, New York, where the FBI arrested him minutes later. Between 1945 and 1948, American investigators systematically reviewed captured German documents, interviewed former Wehrmacht and SS personnel, and cross-referenced intelligence sources. Monti's name began appearing with disturbing frequency. German radio archives contained records of his propaganda broadcasts indicating they were voluntary, not coerced. Waffen-SS personnel files documented his induction, his alias Martin Wiethaupt, his rank of SS Unterführer, and his service with SS Standard Kurt Edgars. Intelligence reports from debriefed American PS mentioned hearing his broadcasts and nodding they seemed genuine. Investigators gradually assembled the complete picture. German interrogation records showed Monti had volunteered information. Wehrmacht transport logs showed he traveled freely, not as a prisoner. Financial records indicated he'd received pay for his services. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Monti was serving in the Air Force. The FBI had been building an airtight case. On October 14, 1948, a federal grand jury indicted Martin James Monti on 21 counts of treason, providing aid and comfort to enemies of the United States. During wartime, each of the 21 counts was anchored by multiple German documents, logs, interrogation reports, and pay records. His lawyers float sabotage, diminished capacity, even brainwashing, but the paperwork buried those claims. On January 17, 1949, facing overwhelming documentation, Monti pleaded guilty to all 21 counts. Court still heard testimony summarizing his defection, SS service, propaganda, and pay before sentencing. This made Martin James Monti the first U.S. military officer convicted of treason for collaborating with Nazi Germany. The maximum penalty for treason was death. Court observers expected Monti would be sentenced to hang, but the judge's decision surprised many. Instead of death, Monti received 25 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, and a dishonorable discharge. Several factors influenced the sentence. The war had ended nearly 4 years earlier. The immediate wartime context that might have demanded maximum punishment had passed. Legal complexities existed around his previous court-martial and presidential clemency, and by 1949, with the Cold War beginning, executing American citizens might undermine messaging about American moral superiority. Monti served time at several federal facilities and staged a hunger strike that earned an extra 12 months. In 1951, in United States versus Monti, he tried to withdraw his guilty plea, denied. He was paroled in 1960 after roughly 12 years behind bars. In 1963, he sought clemency again, claiming a secret plan to assassinate Hitler, also denied. From defection to death, Monti's story spans 56 years of secrets, lies, and one of The most bizarre betrayals in military history. He lived quietly in Florida and died in Fort Lauderdale in 2000. He is buried in Florissant, Missouri. He never provided a completely satisfactory explanation for his actions. In occasional interviews he offered various justifications: anti-communism, family loyalty, youthful confusion, but none of these fully account for the calculated nature of his defection and willing SS service. So, what does this case teach us? Martin James Monti remains unique in American military history, the only known case of a U.S. military officer voluntarily defecting to Nazi Germany during World War II. His case appears in military law textbooks as a precedent-setting example. It established important legal principles about treason prosecutions. Based on documentary evidence, it highlighted critical gaps in military record-keeping and intelligence sharing. It demonstrated the challenges of prosecuting wartime treason after hostilities end. The case revealed uncomfortable truths about chaos and incomplete record-keeping in the aftermath of World War II. In that chaos, a defector and traitor nearly escaped justice entirely. It raised persistent questions about how someone with Monti's background was allowed to enlist in the first place, and more critically, how he was able to re-enlist after his 1945 court-martial conviction. The Monti case is often cited discussions of vetting procedures and the importance of record sharing between military intelligence, criminal investigation, and personnel systems, gaps that were clearly revealed in the years following World War II. Later declassifications and FOIA releases added detail, but the core facts were public by 1949. But the facts are unambiguous and thoroughly documented. Martin James Monti voluntarily stole an American military aircraft, deliberately flew it to enemy territory, defected to Nazi Germany, joined the Waffen-SS under the alias Martin Wiethaupt, attained the rank of S-Sura, served with SS standard Kurt Edgars, and worked as a propagandist for the Third Reich. German records and captured documents became the core evidence. His conviction, his imprisonment, is a matter of legal record. Military legal scholars continue to study his case for insights into loyalty, treason, and military justice. It serves as a reminder that even in America's most celebrated military victory, there were individuals who chose betrayal over duty. If you value sourced World War II histories like this, consider subscribing. Here's my question: which single record-sharing failure in 1945 to 1947 do you think mattered most in letting Monti re-enlist? The limited scope of his court-martial charges, the conditions of his clemency, or poor intelligence coordination between agencies? I'll pin the most insightful comment. Next week I'm covering another verified case that remained classified for decades. American PS who chose to stay with their communist captives after the Korean War. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, the best historical lessons come from carefully documented facts.